don't know that you can.
I don't know. I think it's wide. I believe we're live.
Oh, hey, thank you for just spraying that on me. Hey, I'm Chris Velasco, senior mobile editor at Engadget. We are prepping pretty crazily for the Apple event tomorrow. We're actually in our San Francisco studio trying out some gear, getting a sense of how everything works. But I wanted to take a couple minutes to talk to you guys about what we expect to see, what we're excited about, what we're not excited about. And it's actually a lot of the latter stuff because between you and me, the secret's basically out at this point, right? So we're getting the iPhone X, which is the sort of all-screen iPhone with a little notch, the essential style notch sort of cut out of the top. And then we have two follow-up versions to the iPhone 7, the iPhone 8 and iPhone 8s. These were leaked as part of an iOS 11 Golden Master build that sort of made the rounds over the weekend. And yeah, a lot of the secrets are out there. It's a little sad actually. Like these people have worked really hard to kind of keep the surprise a thing, and oh, sorry. So really quick, let's start with the iPhone 8X. It does sort of fall in line with a lot of what we've seen from Android devices like this, for example, the Samsung Galaxy Note 8. It doesn't have the same sort of full edge-to-edge screen that we've seen on devices like the Essential PH1, and that's kind of what we expect to see out of the iPhone. There's going to be a bit of a notch cut out of the top that sort of contains the camera and the earpiece. So a slightly different construction than what you've seen from most bezel-less smartphones, but should be interesting to see. We have gotten a lot of insight into the features that we're going to get. So for example, Face ID should take the place of Touch ID. That will allow you to unlock your phone with your face and sort of use your face as a means to authenticate purchases in iTunes and the App Store, which is really cool, but also at the same time, very strange. Apple has been pushing fingerprint sensors in its phones and more recently in its Macs for quite some time now. And for them to sort of take that really well-defined security method and just say, yeah, we're not going to worry about that anymore, feels a little bit strange. I feel it's sort of a coincidence that I have the Note 8 with me because the Note 8 has Face Unlock as well. So did the Note 7 before it started blowing up. And the thing is, yes, it's not the hardest thing in the world to foil. If you have a photo of yourself, you're generally able to do it. That said, it is a little more secure in smartphones like the Note 8 than some people have chosen to give it credit for. So there's actually a setting in the Note 8's sort of options that lets you make Face Unlock a little less secure in exchange for it being a little faster. So that is probably one of the things we expect to see sort of on the iPhone 8s and the iPhone X. Hopefully there's a way to just sort of maintain that level of security. We don't really know. Hopefully Apple will explain that in much more detail. I'm personally also really looking forward to seeing a lot of the ARKit stuff. So in just about all of the iPhone leaks you've seen to date, the camera array is arrayed sort of vertically as opposed to horizontally. And that should theoretically give you slightly better performance when you're building applications that kind of try to augment reality, to kind of give you those different perspectives and allow you to kind of build extra features and sort of build new experiences on top of what you actually see around you. So that's going to be really cool as well. Are there any questions coming in? We don't really do a ton of YouTube stuff. So if there is anything happening right here, I am not maybe the best person to tell, but I'm sure the people behind the camera will be able to share any of that.
No questions yet, but maybe some of the things that you are planning to see on the hands-on tomorrow.
So really what I'm looking forward to is like the iPhone X is going to be a thing. It's fairly well understood at this point, even though it's not actually, it hasn't been officially seen. I'm very curious to see what actually happens with the iPhone 8 and the 8 Plus. And more specifically, if Apple has any sort of clarity it can provide on what the sort of transition is, right? Because the iPhone X does very much seem to be that sort of feature-forward device. It's this thing that really kind of represents the future of where Apple wants its iPhones to go, and then the 8 and the 8 Plus kind of feel like the stopgap solution. So what I'm sort of expecting to see, or hear rather, is that Apple is sort of positioning the iPhone X as the phone of the future. You will all have this eventually. In the meantime, the commonalities in place because of iOS 11 allow you to sort of get a feel for some of that on the iPhone 8 and 8 Plus. So I think what they're kind of going for here is if you're not an early adopter, if you're not a crazy person who enjoys buying first generation Apple hardware, which by the way, is smart because a lot of times it's not the best, you could go into an iPhone 8 or an 8 Plus, kind of get a sense of what Apple is trying to accomplish and sort of get get a first taste and sort of get acclimated to these new features and these new practices that Apple is going to be focusing on in the future. So when that sort of comes to pass, I think it's fair to say the traditional iPhone, as we know, will probably fall by the wayside. I honestly give it like 2 years, but we'll see about that. But yeah, I very much want to see how Apple plans to transition people rather from these more conventional, traditional iPhones into this device where it clearly has spent a lot of time and effort and money, for that matter, building the X into something that feels a bit more futuristic, that feels a bit more modern, and frankly, kind of captures a lot of what makes a lot of new Android phones feel really special.
We have somebody here asking what you think the Android killer feature will be in the iPhone X.
Is it terrible to say I don't think there is one yet? I mean, based off of what we've seen, there are a lot of really neat little touches, and emoji is one of these things that people are talking about, where you can sort of use it basically like takes your face, takes your facial motions and sort of expressions, and sort of conveys them through an emoji. Uh, Things like that will, I think, help make the iPhone 8 and the iPhone 8 and the iPhone X feel a little more novel than they might otherwise have. But in general, from what we know about what's going on with these phones and the new hardware and the software, uh, yeah, I don't know that anything there is necessarily an Android killer. It's especially because Android has gotten really, really, really good. I've always been the kind of person to split my time between iOS and Android just because doing what we do, you kind of have to be fluent in all of it. And I've been really, really impressed by devices like the Galaxy Note 8 and the Essential PH1, even though that thing had some pretty questionable camera issues. I think what we're seeing on the Android side in general kind of tends to outpace Apple. They're quicker to iterate, they're quicker to get stuff out there. Is it always the most polished? No, that's where Apple kind of comes in. They sort of take the ideas that are floating right out there and they just sort of execute. They apply that extra layer of polish that kind of makes them feel a little more usable, a little more valuable. Yeah, so long story short, and that was kind of a rambly answer, but no, I don't think there's anything actually in the iPhone 8 or the 8X that is going to blow an Android device out of the water. If you're an Android person, I don't this will be the year that Apple kind of gets close. This is the year that you might maybe think about getting an iPhone, but I really don't think there's a great argument based off of what we know right now to kind of make that leap.
Are you excited to see the new Steve Jobs Theater?
I am actually. I've been to California a couple times. I only really come out here for Apple stuff and Google stuff, so my like understanding of California isn't the best. So when we sort of went to the last Apple event, you could sort of see the spaceship in the distance, and like it kind of sucks all the air out of the room. Like you're sort of driving by this vaguely suburban area in California, and you sort of look over and see this like gleaming steel ring in progress. The Steve Jobs Park, or excuse me, the Steve Jobs Theater is, I believe, located right in the middle. There's apparently like a hill that the ring is constructed around, and the auditorium is situated on that hill. So I'm really curious to see what level of spectacle Apple tries to bring to it. I think it's really important to kind of think about spectacle in that way because Android device makers, Samsung most particularly, they get it. Like if you've seen the Unpacked event where they unveiled the Note 8, and really any of the Unpacked events they've done in the past couple of years, Samsung knows how to put on a show. Like they're very garish, they're very well executed, they're frankly gorgeous and intriguing in a way that Apple events generally aren't. Apple sort of relies on the strength of Tim Cook and Phil Schiller and Craig Federighi and really all of their executive staff, and then just sort of the momentum of the iPhone. So they never really feel like they have to put on a huge show, but I'm curious to see how that's going to change, if at all, once we kind of step foot into the Steve Jobs Theater.
Okay, we have somebody saying that their prediction is 24-bit in iTunes, and then somebody else saying that a W1 chip should be a big feature, and that they predict that hi-fi audio will be a big feature this year.
God, I hope so.
Is that true?
I don't know that that's, based off of what we know, I don't know that that's necessarily the case, but there's never, for a company like Apple that's kind of always figured itself on some level as having music at its core. So the iPods and iTunes were a very big part of what made Apple sort of big again after sort of languishing in the computer space they sort of made a name for themselves once again by this really dogged commitment to music. And yet, to your point, we haven't really seen Apple embrace hi-fi audio, whereas devices like the LG V30, which hint hint, we're actually shooting this on and might try to do some live stuff on tomorrow at the Apple event with, they've shown that people really seem to care about this. And they really care when these things don't work all that well. So there have been some hi-fi devices in the past that kind of never really took off the way people expected them to, or never really got the support that they needed. I think the V30 is a great example of a hi-fi phone done right. I don't really see why I don't rather see why everyone doesn't do this. I wonder if there are some infrastructure things that have to change on the iTunes side for them to start storing and selling and kind of making this really high-end, high-quality music available. If you're streaming, say, over Apple Music, you're probably not going to get that full quality, but I'd love to see them at some point give you the option to download, I don't know, like a 24-bit file or a FLAC or something. It's something that people who care about audio have been thinking about for a really long time. Apple has never really made too many overtures about this being a priority for them, but I'd love to see that change.
Can Apple's iPhone 8 play 4K movies?
So as far as I know, well, I'll be honest with you, I don't know the answer to that question. The screen does not appear to be a 4K display. Very few smartphones have 4K displays. The only one I can think of off the top of my head are some older Sonys, which were great, but never really, again, took off the way people wanted them to. I think that with the transition to an OLED screen, however, we're going to see a big jump in quality. So I hate to keep talking about the Note 8 while this is ostensibly an Apple thing, but I am holding a Note 8, and it's frankly insane how good this screen is. It's mobile HDR compatible. It has the really beautiful sort of bright colors that you'd expect out of an AMOLED display. And with Apple making that leap into this new kind of screen technology, I'm hoping they capture even just like a fraction of what this does, because this is basically the best looking screen I have in my house. And for my iPhone, which I typically use as my daily driver, for that to sort of come close is all I really ask. I don't know that that's necessarily going to be the case. I'm also a little concerned about the level of production Apple is going to have to hit to kind of keep these things coming out at a reasonable pace. I do expect shortages in the short term. So if you're itching for an iPhone X, you would probably be really well served by mashing your refresh key and like trying to lock down your pre-order as soon as possible, because I'm pretty sure they're going to go fast, and I don't know that Apple has the capacity, at least on the screen side, to kind of keep things moving the way they want them to.
Do you have any ideas for price points?
So no, I don't. I think it's probably fair to say that given the top tier iPhone 7 Plus now goes for about $930, I really cannot see a way in which the iPhone X goes for less than $1,000. I would love to be proven wrong by that. I'm fairly sure the 8 and the 8 Plus will stick to the tried and true sort of pricing configuration you'll see on the 7 and 7 Plus. So if you sort of understand that, you're not going to get any surprises. It'll cost the same it always has. But the X really has the X factor, right? Like, we don't really know what's in this thing that kind of differentiates it aside from the screen. I think the production costs are probably going to be pretty insane compared to a standard iPhone, so we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I would be shocked if it was under $1,000. This is very much an early adopter sort of. I don't like the word fanboy because it has like really icky connotations, but it's the kind of thing where people who have loved Apple and kind of don't mind paying a lot of money to be guinea pigs will flock to. And that's frankly been the case for a lot of Apple's really premium first generation hardware. I got burned by a 2012 MacBook Pro with a Retina display. I love that thing. I spent more money on that than I ever cared to, and it just consistently let me down. So it's going to be pricey, and I think you're probably going to regret the decision on some level. That sounds really depressing, but I don't know. I've been burned by Apple first run hardware in the past. I know a lot of other people have been too. So I'm cautiously optimistic that you're not going to pay too much for a device that doesn't really work all that great.
Is this Apple news coming from a Samsung enthusiast?
I wasn't always a Samsung enthusiast. I do really like the S8 and the S8 Plus and the Note 8. I like this for like crossword puzzles and stuff like that, to be totally honest with you. I've always just been sort of a phone nerd. My brand inclinations have sort of ebbed and flowed over the years. I was a super crazy HTC fanboy for the longest time, and then they did like the M9, and the 10 was fine, but then the U Ultra was kind of dumb. They're coming back, so I feel pretty strongly that they're doing a pretty good job. I mentioned earlier we're actually shooting this on the LG V30, which, despite some shortcomings, has been an awesome phone so far. This isn't even a production model. Like, this is not ready for people to buy yet, and we've actually really enjoyed it. So I am a Samsung enthusiast, but I'm also an Apple enthusiast and an LG enthusiast and an HTC like underdog supporter. I kind of love them all. You sort of have to do stuff like this, I think.
Okay, last question. What are the chances that the phone will have the higher refresh rate that the Apple iPad Pro has?
I would bet you like $50 that it does. Whoever you are, I'm just sort of getting this stuff from off screen. I will like virtually shake your hand. And if it doesn't do 120 hertz refresh rate and like the True Tone display that we saw on the iPad Pros, which sort of uses an ambient light sensor to change the color temperature of the screen depending on where you are, I will give you $50 if that's not there. Like, the screen really does seem like the area where Apple has invested the most on this device, aside from the software, which is going to be applicable to all of the iPhones we're going to see tomorrow. But yeah, I would bet on that. And I don't mind being wrong, but I would very much not like to be wrong. I don't think I am.
You have a couple of people here who are willing to take you up on that bet, by the way.
It's to the person who asked the question. You can reach out. My email is v@engadget.com. And I swear to God, we'll do the virtual handshake. And if I'm wrong, I will PayPal you $50.
All right, nice. All right, any closing remarks?
So thank you for joining me as I ramble and play with a phone while playing with another phone that we're shooting on. We're going to be covering the Apple event live tomorrow from the Apple spaceship, more specifically the Steve Jobs Theater. We're going to be doing some live hands-ons, which is not something we're super used to, but I'm excited to give this a shot. I'm going to be on the floor pointing this camera rig at some really cool phones, and hopefully I'll have a lot more to talk about then. So thank you for watching, and hopefully this wasn't too stupid.